1. What schizophrenia really is. Schizophrenia is not a split personality, as is often thought. It is a serious and complex mental disorder in which the perception of reality is disturbed. A person may hear voices, see things that are not there, feel that their thoughts are being read, or that someone is controlling their behavior. These experiences are not fantasy. For a person with schizophrenia, they are absolutely real. The disease is caused by disturbances in the brain, especially in how information is processed. The brain seems to lose its ability to distinguish between what is important and what is unimportant, between what is real and what is imagined. This affects not only perception, but also thinking, speech, motivation, and emotions. Often, the person becomes distant from those around them, withdrawn, anxious, or suspicious. It is important to understand that schizophrenia is not a sentence or madness. It is a diagnosis that requires medical and psychological help. And the earlier it is started, the greater the chances of recovery. People with this diagnosis can live a full life with the right support and treatment. 2. Destruction of the perception filter. Imagine that your brain is a radio receiver. Normally, it is tuned precisely. Out of all the noise, it picks up only the necessary wave, the speech of the interlocutor, the signal of the traffic light, the sound of footsteps behind you. Everything else is background noise that you don't even pay attention to. In a person with schizophrenia, this filter begins to malfunction. The radio picks up dozens of waves at once. Other people's conversations, the noise of the air conditioner, the gaze of a passerby, a flash of light. Everything seems important and significant. The brain loses its ability to separate the main from the secondary. This condition is called selective attention disorder. This overload is perceived as chaos. A person may start looking for meaning where there is none. Why is there a black car outside the window and not a white one? What does that glance mean? Are they trying to tell him something? The filter no longer works, and every random event becomes a potential threat or a secret message. To an outside observer, this may seem strange or ridiculous, but for the person themselves, it is a very stressful, anxious, and often frightening reality. 3. Voices and hallucinations. It's not just hearing. When a person with schizophrenia says they hear voices, it's not a metaphor. They really hear them, as if someone were standing next to them and speaking. These voices may sound inside their head or outside, as if someone were speaking from the next room, the television, or the street. This is not the inner dialogue that everyone has. It is someone else's speech that cannot be controlled. Often, the voices don't just talk. They command, criticize, and insult. They can be threatening, accusatory, or frighteningly intrusive. Some people hear one voice, others hear dozens. Some try to argue with them, some are afraid, and some believe they are higher powers or secret services. Auditory hallucinations are one of the most severe manifestations of schizophrenia because they interfere with reality. A person may do what the voices tell them to do or, conversely, refuse to communicate so as not to provoke them. Imagine how difficult it is to live when you cannot distinguish between your own thoughts and external intrusions. Modern medications can help reduce or completely eliminate hallucinations, but this takes time and support. And most importantly, do not devalue this experience. For a person, this is not a fabrication, but a real part of their everyday life. 4. Delusions, hallucinations, and distorted logic. A delusion is not just a strange idea. It is a persistent, absolutely convinced belief that does not correspond to reality. But the main thing is that a person with schizophrenia cannot simply change their mind or realize their mistake. To them, delusional thoughts seem logical, plausible, and even obvious. Delusions can vary. Some people are convinced that they are being followed. Some consider themselves chosen, and some are convinced that their loved ones have been replaced. The logic behind these beliefs can be detailed. Facts are tailored to fit the theory, and coincidences are perceived as evidence. For example, a passerby looked askance. That means he knows something. A car drove by 3 times in a row, a sign. A TV presenter blinked, a code. These connections may seem crazy to those around them, but within their distorted perception, they form a correct picture of the world. Sometimes this is accompanied by illusions. When an ordinary object is perceived in a distorted way, a statue looks, a mirror breathes, a rustle in the corner is a living creature. Delirium is not stupidity or fantasy. It is the result of a disruption in the connections in the brain, where critical thinking no longer works as before. And again, for the person themselves, this is not delirium, but reality, which they experience seriously. 5. How the world seems alive, hostile, mystical. For a person with schizophrenia, the world can completely change its face. Ordinary things, a house, a street, a room, lose their neutrality. Everything begins to mean something. The color of the walls seems strange, the position of objects seems deliberate, and the faces of passers-by seem like masks with intentions. This sensation is called delusional perception. The world seems to come alive and address you personally. Objects become charged, frightening, or, conversely, extremely important. The lamp looks, the door pulses, the wind speaks. A person may feel that they are being watched, even if they are alone. This is not a hallucination in the literal sense, but a distorted emotional coloring of perception. Similarly, time can slow down or stretch out. Space can narrow or change. Sometimes it seems that ordinary sounds, drops of water, creaks, rustles, carry a message. Everything takes on a mystical or even threatening tone. Sometimes this leads to the feeling that the world is unreal, as if the person has woken up in a movie set. This state is frightening because it destroys trust in one's own senses. This is why many people with schizophrenia withdraw into themselves, not because they don't want to communicate, but because the world they perceive has become too strange and difficult to understand. 6. What a person feels: fear, loneliness, confusion. Imagine waking up in a world where everything seems normal, but something is wrong. People look at you strangely. Words sound different. Things seem to have a life of their own. And most importantly, you can't explain to anyone what's going on because you don't fully understand it yourself. This is the internal experience of schizophrenia. Fear is a constant companion. If voices threaten you, if you feel like you're being watched or receiving signs from the world around you, the anxiety never goes away. This fear may be irrational, but it is very real. It does not go away with logic or support. It permeates all perception. Loneliness comes when a person realizes that no one shares their reality. Attempts to explain what they are feeling are often met with misunderstanding, irritation, or ridicule. Therefore, many people distance themselves, become closed off, and avoid communication. Not because they don't want to talk, but because they are afraid of being misunderstood or rejected. And finally, there is confusion. When you cannot trust your own eyes, ears, and thoughts, it is difficult to rely on anything. The very sense of I can become blurred. Who am I? Where is the boundary between me and this voice? What is really real? This is not just psychological stress. It is deep emotional suffering that a person lives with every day. And understanding this means taking the first step toward true empathy. 7. How treatment works and how perception changes. Despite its frightening reputation, schizophrenia is a treatable condition. Modern medicine has made great strides in this area. Today, people with this diagnosis have the chance not just to survive, but to live relatively stable and fulfilling lives. The basis of treatment is antipsychotics, drugs that affect neurotransmitters in the brain, especially dopamine. This chemical mediator is involved in the transmission of signals, and in schizophrenia, its activity is distorted. Antipsychotics help to calm excessive stimulation, reducing the intensity of hallucinations, delusions, and anxiety. But the effect is not immediate. It often takes several weeks for the symptoms to begin to subside. And although medications do not cure schizophrenia completely, they help restore the filter of perception. A person stops seeing hidden meanings in everything and begins to distinguish again between imagination and reality. Psychotherapy and support are the second important part of treatment. People learn to trust themselves again, cope with anxiety, and build dialogue with those around them. The support of family, professionals, and even mutual aid groups plays a huge role in recovery. Often, it is only after improvement that a person first notices how distorted their experience was. It can be difficult to realize that you have been living in a frightening, alien